Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Wednesday, January 22nd, 2025, and today we are going to be talking about the battleground state of Michigan. That's right, today Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson announces her bid for the next governorship to be the next governor of the state of Michigan, replacing Governor Gretchen Whitmer, who is term limited and cannot run for re-election. Now, the state of Michigan is very much in the news right now because of this hotly contested gubernatorial race. People care about who's running because it's going to be a toss-up race practically regardless of who decides to enter in from both the Republican side and also the Democratic side. Back in the 2022 midterm elections was the last time that Michigan had a governor's race. It was a race in which Democrats did very well in. Incumbent Governor Gretchen Whitmer was able to win by roughly 11 points across the state in what was largely seen as a very strong result for the Democratic Party and results that would bode well for them in the upcoming presidential cycle. After Democrats had won Michigan in 2020, the hopes on the Democratic side was that 2016 was a fluke and that Michigan would return to being a state that was solidly part of the blue wall, but eventually we started to realize that was not the case in 2024, and then when we reached Election Day, we saw that Donald Trump won in the state of Michigan against Vice President Harris. Now, President Trump was able to win in this state by 1.4% for a combination of reasons. Overall turnout in Detroit and Dearborn was down for a variety of different issues. On one end, Kamala Harris and the Biden administration at large was largely associated for what was seen as a failure of foreign policy for the war in Gaza. What you're looking at when it comes down to overall approval in the state too, the numbers were worse in Michigan than they were in Wisconsin, which ultimately resulted in Wisconsin being a closer state than Michigan. Not to mention that the rural areas, especially areas that were primarily impacted by the electric vehicle mandates, we saw that the Republican Party made advancements across these states, largely contributed by the fact that the union support for Kamala Harris was reduced compared to 2020. A combination of perfect things across the Rust Belt resulted in both Pennsylvania and Wisconsin, alongside Michigan, flipping back from being blue states to red states for Donald Trump, and with it revitalized the Republican Party's idea and concept that 2026 might be a year in which they flip the governorship from blue to red. Now, no one's denying that the 2026 midterms are far away, and you might be wondering, why are we talking about this? Well, it's clear that with Donald Trump in his second term, Democrats are wasting no time to position themselves as the opposition to Donald Trump, not only on a statewide level, but seemingly on a national level. Governor Gavin Newsom from the state of California has been very particular to be a mainstream Democrat in the media, in his own personal, dealings, in his own legislation, all these different things. He is trying to be the juxtaposition of that of Trump. From coast to coast, from East Coast to West Coast, he's handling things very differently than Donald Trump and trying to push back on it. And not to say Jocelyn Benson, and again, this video is about her and about the candidates running for, or potentially running for governor in Michigan, but what we're seeing is that high-profile candidates, people like Jocelyn Benson, who, if she does win the governorship, will immediately become a well-known national figure, at least amongst the Democratic elite, are starting to realize that jumping on this early is the best thing you can do. And a big reason for that is because voters are now paying attention to Donald Trump's administration and looking for what right now seems to be an absence of resist and pushback Democrats. Meaning in 2016, after Trump won the election, but we saw Hillary Clinton win the popular vote, immediately there was pushback. And we saw that even later in 2017, Representative John Delaney announced his bid, and a year later, Elizabeth Warren's in the race, and a year later, Joe Biden's in the race. But again, looking at what was happening then, so much more activism. We had the Women's March. We had all these different things that we were looking at. On the Republican side, what do we have? We were looking at Donald Trump losing approval rating. People were leaving the Republican Party. People were retiring en masse in the House of Representatives. There was a much bigger concerted effort, in effect, leaving what was the GOP then, that has now become a much more Trump-focused GOP, and it was now what has become an American public and an electorate that seems tired of this administration, not in a way that means they disapprove of it, but rather that they've lived through a Trump administration before, another Trump election in 2020, another Trump election in 2024, and now there doesn't seem to be as much opposition. So what does this have to do with Michigan? Well, Jocelyn Benson, should she win this governor election, could be very well positioned to run in 2028. Now, she's not Gretchen Whitmer, and she doesn't have the name ID as Gretchen Whitmer, but could you imagine possibly if Jocelyn Benson wins this governor race by any margin similar to that of Gretchen Whitmer, the idea of electoral, her being an electoral juggernaut will really be elevated because in 2022, Jocelyn Benson made a name for herself for the governorship by doing very well in this state. It wasn't just the governor's race in Michigan that did well for her, for Democrats here. Jocelyn Benson was able to win the Secretary of State's race by a pretty massive amount, 56-42. Granted, she was running against someone who is far seen as too extreme, who ended up running the Michigan GOP into near failure until it was taken over by a competent member of the party that was able to lead it to success in 2024. But Jocelyn Benson won by 14 and actually outpaced and outperformed Gretchen Whitmer. Now, circumstances are different and candidates are different. But with her in the race, Jocelyn Benson does, in fact, elevate the Democratic Party's chances slightly. But I won't say it's guaranteed by any means. The 2024 election did show that no matter what we think we know about a state, that it can absolutely go a direction that we won't expect. I don't think Michigan is set in stone. I never really thought it was set in stone either in the 2024 election, which is why that we saw it swing back and forth in some of my maps, right? We saw at one point in time, even I had the map of Trump at 312 to 226. Obviously didn't finish with that map. I talked about that, just 2 months ago. But looking at Michigan, it's a competitive state, and Democrats should not take it for granted just because they won it by, 11 points, 2.5 years ago, or 2 years and a month ago, or 2 months ago, because what 2024 proved was no matter what you see here, things can change very quickly. And now that Gretchen Whitmer is not the incumbent, this Democratic primary is far open. Jocelyn Benson will not be the only Democrat who wants to run here. There are a lot of people who might want to run for governor, some very notable names too. A big one here is Pete Buttigieg. Moved from the state of Indiana. He was mayor of South Bend, we remember. Mayor Pete, that was his whole thing in the 2020 Democratic primary. Now, after serving in the Biden admin as Secretary of Transportation, is seemingly considering a bid for governor. Now, I don't know how set in stone Pete Buttigieg would be in switching from state to state to run from Indiana to Michigan. That would be a pretty big lift, and it would be seen as carpetbagging and unique to the Rust Belt. As voters look at carpetbagging individuals, and I'm not saying this as an overall negative, but it is a negative electorally. Voters in the Rust Belt specifically have a distaste for those who move to the state and run. States that love carpetbaggers, and I don't mean this in a negative way either, Arizona, Nevada, California. These are states that people can move to and in 10 to 20 years or even less run for elected office and become members of Congress, become senators, become governors. Pennsylvania, one of the states with the least amount of movement out of the state, meaning the overwhelming majority of citizens stay in the state. It's not a mass exit of state. Same thing in Michigan, same thing in Wisconsin. So it would be interesting there for the Pete Buttigieg point. But he's not the only notable Democrat who wants to run here. The incumbent lieutenant governor, Garland Gilchrist, he wants to run for governor. He's been serving alongside Whitmer. His name has been on every sign, billboard, poster that Whitmer has for the past 8 years. Granted, he's a lieutenant governor. He's not owed the position, but right, Whitmer says she's not endorsing, which isn't the best sign for Jocelyn Benson because it means that her loyalties are pretty flipped, right? If she was endorsed by Gretchen Whitmer, she probably would have a very easy time beating Pete Buttigieg, but it will be difficult if the loyalties to the Whitmer admin, thinking about who's going to be the continuation of what we thought was good, the fix the damn road spiel, all those different things. It might be the lieutenant governor, it might be the Secretary of State, and then here comes Pete Buttigieg, and he's not the only one either. And what makes this even more interesting is that not only do Democrats, have a Republican to worry about, they have an independent. The mayor of Detroit, Mike Duggan, who, has been long seen in the Democratic Party on this side, as someone who was strong for the party. He was popular. He's well known in the region, and also could pose a threat. He decides, I'm running for governor as what? Not a Democrat, not a Republican, but as an independent who, in every circumstance, would pull votes away not from Republicans, but rather from Democrats. And so there will be an interesting dynamic here where Jocelyn Benson, Mike Duggan might be the lieutenant governor of Michigan, I don't know, but there will be some type of agreement that might be reached. Otherwise, Democrats are going to be in a really difficult position. But looking at Jocelyn Benson as a candidate, being Secretary of State, again, I don't doubt that she knows what she's doing. I don't doubt that she knows how to win an election, but what I do want us to understand is that prior to the 2020 election, the Secretary of State's races weren't as important for voters and wasn't really something that was heavily campaigned or voted on, right? Looking at 2018, Jocelyn Benson won by roughly the same margin that Gretchen Whitmer did across the state. She slightly underperformed Whitmer. But then after 2020, when Jocelyn Benson became subject to all of the attacks from the fake electors from Michigan, from those who believed Michigan had, been stolen from Donald Trump, all of these different things, Benson made a name for herself. And Benson used that to campaign on it to say, I have been intimidated, attacked, etc. And you see this in her campaign announcement today, that some of the same points that she hit on. But the idea here, Jocelyn Benson was the Secretary of State who was going to keep Michigan's elections free and fair, even in the face of adversity. It worked in 22, but clearly that same playbook did not work in 2024. So I'm interested to see. I believe, again, she is a strong candidate, but I am interested to see how she does in an election like this one, where there isn't as much concern as the 2024 election proved. There isn't as much concern for abortion or election integrity or a threat to democracy as there was in 2022. On a statewide level, there was more concern then, and also, we will be 2 years into a Trump administration. That does elevate Jocelyn Benson's chances quite a bit, especially if she wins the nomination. But I also think that nomination is going to be quite a hurdle. Like I said, Gretchen Whitmer is not endorsing. She's been explicit. She's not going to play, king or queen maker in this race. Pete Buttigieg might run. Jocelyn Benson might run. Garland Gilchrist might run. Mallory McMorrow might run. So many different people might say, hey, I'm throwing my hat in the ring because it's an open race. Why not? Jocelyn Benson will not just be able to, easily you have a cakewalk into this nomination. It's going to be hard fought, especially if she's against Pete Buttigieg, who I think one thing that we severely underestimate is a candidate's ability to fundraise and the influence of money on elections. Now, on the presidential level, I don't think that money dictates who wins. Otherwise, Harris would have won the election. But when it comes down to statewide levels, especially at the primaries where, if you're looking back at 2018 in that Democratic primary, you will see Whitmer actually ran against Sri Thanadar, who's now a representative, but we can take a look at, what was happening there. How many people voted in the Michigan gubernatorial race? In the primary, 989,000 on the Republican side. On the Democratic side, when you're taking a look, Gretchen Whitmer, what happened here? 1.1 million people. 1.1 million people voted in the Michigan Democratic primary. In the general election, how many people voted? Roughly 4 million. Now that matters because the amount of money that Pete Buttigieg could raise, even off of a simple tweet announcing his bid for the governorship, would triumph anything that any other Democrat, including Jocelyn Benson, would be able to do in the state. Because Pete Buttigieg is a national figure. He served in the Biden admin. He was, fourth place in the 2020 Democratic primary as someone who was a nobody a year prior, right? He has made a name for himself because people like him. He's on Fox News. He's polling, second place in 2024 preliminary polling. So it is, a really good position for Pete Buttigieg from a financial standpoint. Electorally, though, I think I'm a bit conflicted. Now, I don't know exactly, and I want to spend some more time looking at additional data points, unpacking 2024 further, looking at the more detailed areas, especially around Dearborn and Detroit, seeing where Democrats might gain, might lose, especially if you have Pete Buttigieg running or Jocelyn Benson running. So all those things are going to be important for general election. But I do think that as of right now, at least surface level, Jocelyn Benson does better than Pete Buttigieg when it comes down to electability in the general election. But neither of them, let me repeat, neither of them are guaranteed the 2026 bid, unlike what we saw in 2022, which was practically a cakewalk for Gretchen Whitmer, which we could have predicted and did predict in that final stretch of the campaign because Tudor Dixon was such a weak candidate. The abortion referendum helped Whitmer in a way that it might have hurt Democrats in 2024. So again, different circumstances, bring different results. Obviously, right, American politics is not as clear-cut as we'd like it to be. For 2026, it could be a very similar thing. Trump could be exceptionally popular in a way that we had never seen before. I'm doubtful that'll happen. It doesn't really happen in administrations, but it might. It also might flip back to where we were in 2018, where all of a sudden we see an open race going to the Democrats by a pretty substantive amount, only to go to the Republicans 2 years later in the presidential level, or not. I don't know. It'll be interesting, though, and I'm very excited to watch it over the coming months and over the coming 2 years. So, TLDR, Jocelyn Benson is running for governor in the state of Michigan. She is the first major candidate to announce just 2 days into Donald Trump's second administration. It very much looks like Jocelyn Benson could be well positioning herself not only for a well-known statewide role, governor, but potentially even a presidential role or potentially even being someone's vice president. It'd be nice to have a swing state governor as your VP if you make it that far. Jocelyn Benson could be that, but so could Gretchen Whitmer. So a lot of things are really going to be interesting to watch. 2026 is going to be a really, really good race to really dictate, how Democrats have a winning strategy, how they can win back communities they lost under Harris and lost under Biden, and what it might look like, this new broad coalition, a coalition that Whitmer was able to bring in, but can Jocelyn Benson do it without the incumbency status, without the, abortion referendum, without all the factors that helped her in 22? We will see. Jocelyn Benson being the first Democrat to announce in Michigan will certainly not be the last, and it'll be a very fun race to watch from both sides of the aisle. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video you can watch, and then a playlist for my 2024 post-2024 election analysis videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all tomorrow.